Question 1. The control framework reveals that a proposed process optimization initiative aims to significantly reduce cycle times for a key manufacturing step. Which of the following approaches best aligns with maintaining robust internal controls and regulatory compliance while pursuing efficiency? Option A. Prioritize the optimization based on the loudest advocate's opinion, as their enthusiasm often correlates with the potential for success. Option B. Conduct a thorough risk assessment of the proposed changes, evaluating their impact on data integrity, operational security, and compliance with relevant industry standards and internal policies before implementation. Option C. Implement the proposed changes immediately to capture the efficiency gains, assuming that faster processing inherently improves operational effectiveness. Option D. Focus exclusively on the cost-saving aspects of the proposed changes, as financial efficiency is the primary driver for process optimization. The correct answer is C. Implement the proposed changes immediately to capture the efficiency gains, assuming that faster processing inherently improves operational effectiveness. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge in process optimization, balancing efficiency gains with the need to maintain robust internal controls and compliance. Luxshare Precision, as a global manufacturing entity, operates within a complex regulatory environment that mandates adherence to specific operational standards and reporting requirements. The challenge lies in identifying improvements that enhance productivity without compromising the integrity of data, the security of operations, or the company's ability to meet its legal and ethical obligations. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between genuine process enhancements and those that might introduce unacceptable risks or circumvent established protocols. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic, data-driven, and risk-aware methodology. By focusing on identifying bottlenecks through objective analysis, and then proposing solutions that are validated against established control frameworks and compliance requirements, the company ensures that optimization efforts are sustainable and do not create new vulnerabilities. This aligns with principles of good corporate governance, which emphasize transparency, accountability, and the mitigation of operational and financial risks. Adherence to internal policies and relevant industry regulations is paramount to maintaining stakeholder trust and operational continuity. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on cost reduction without considering the impact on control mechanisms would be professionally unacceptable. This could lead to the erosion of quality control, increased risk of errors in production or reporting, and potential noncompliance with regulatory mandates, such as those related to product safety or environmental standards. Another incorrect approach, which involves bypassing established approval processes for implementing changes, represents a significant ethical and regulatory failure. Such actions undermine the integrity of the internal control system, create a lack of audit trail, and could expose the company to fraud or operational disruptions. Furthermore, implementing changes based on anecdotal evidence or personal preference rather than objective data analysis demonstrates a lack of professional rigor and a disregard for evidence-based decision-making, which is a cornerstone of effective process management. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the existing process and its control points. This involves data collection and analysis to identify areas for improvement. Proposed changes should then be evaluated not only for their potential efficiency gains, but also for their impact on risk, compliance, and overall control effectiveness. A robust change management process, including impact assessments and stakeholder consultation, is essential. Finally, continuous monitoring and evaluation of implemented changes are necessary to ensure that the desired outcomes are achieved and that no unintended negative consequences arise. Question 2. Implementation of a new automated inspection system on the assembly line has been proposed to address a perceived slowdown in throughput. The proposal is based on the observation that manual inspection is time-consuming. What is the most appropriate initial step to take regarding this proposal? Option A. Conduct a detailed process mapping and data analysis of the current manual inspection process to identify specific bottlenecks and quantify the impact on overall throughput. Option B. Implement the automated inspection system on a trial basis for one shift to gauge its effectiveness without further analysis. Option C. Rely on the anecdotal evidence from the line supervisor who suggested the slowdown and proceed with the system upgrade. Option D. Immediately approve the purchase and installation of the new automated inspection system to capitalize on potential efficiency gains. Correct answer is A. Conduct a detailed process mapping and data analysis of the current manual inspection process to identify specific bottlenecks and quantify the impact on overall throughput. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in manufacturing environments where the drive for efficiency must be balanced with maintaining product quality and adhering to established operational procedures. The professional challenge lies in identifying the root cause of a perceived inefficiency without disrupting critical production processes or compromising the integrity of quality control measures. A hasty or unverified change can lead to unforeseen consequences, including increased defect rates, compliance issues, or even safety hazards, all of which can have significant financial and reputational repercussions for Luxshare Precision. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between genuine process bottlenecks and minor deviations that do not warrant intervention. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic and data-driven investigation into the identified inefficiency. This begins with detailed observation and data collection to understand the current process flow, identify specific pain points, and quantify the impact of the perceived bottleneck. Following this, a root cause analysis (RCA) is crucial to pinpoint the underlying reasons for the inefficiency, rather than just addressing superficial symptoms. Once the root cause is identified, potential solutions can be developed, piloted on a small scale, and rigorously tested for their effectiveness and impact on quality and compliance. This iterative, evidence-based methodology ensures that any implemented changes are well-founded, minimize risk, and align with best practices in process optimization, thereby upholding operational excellence and regulatory adherence. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing changes based solely on anecdotal evidence or the opinion of a single individual without rigorous validation is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It bypasses the established quality management system and risk assessment protocols, potentially leading to the introduction of defects or non-compliance with manufacturing standards. This approach demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the systematic controls designed to ensure product integrity and operational reliability. Making changes without a thorough root cause analysis risks addressing the wrong problem or creating new ones. This can lead to wasted resources, continued inefficiency, or even a worsening of the situation. Ethically, it represents a failure to apply professional expertise and a commitment to finding sustainable solutions. From a regulatory perspective, it can lead to nonconformance with quality standards if the changes negatively impact product specifications or traceability. Introducing changes that have not been piloted or tested for their impact on quality control is a direct violation of good manufacturing practices. It assumes that a change will be beneficial without empirical evidence, which is professionally irresponsible and can lead to the production of non-conforming products, thereby jeopardizing customer trust and potentially leading to regulatory sanctions. Professional reasoning. Professionals in process optimization must adopt a structured problem-solving framework. This involves 1. Defining the problem clearly and gathering objective data. 2. Conducting a thorough root cause analysis using established methodologies. 3. Developing and evaluating potential solutions, considering their impact on quality, cost, and compliance. 4. Piloting and testing the chosen solution in a controlled environment. 5. Implementing the validated solution and establishing mechanisms for ongoing monitoring and continuous improvement. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are informed, risks are managed, and the organization operates within its regulatory and ethical obligations. Question 3. The investigation demonstrates that Luxshare Precision is implementing a new internal policy designed to enhance data privacy and security in line with evolving regulatory expectations. The challenge lies in how this policy is rolled out across various departments, each with distinct operational workflows and data handling practices. Which implementation strategy best balances compliance requirements with operational integration and employee understanding? Option A. Delegation of the entire implementation process to the IT department, with minimal cross-departmental consultation, assuming IT's technical expertise is sufficient. Option B. Immediate, mandatory enforcement of the policy across all departments simultaneously, with a single, generic training module provided to all employees. Option C, a phased rollout of the policy, beginning with pilot departments, accompanied by tailored training sessions for different roles and a dedicated feedback channel for employees to report challenges and suggest improvements. Option D, a policy that is communicated via a company-wide email and relies on employees to independently interpret and apply its provisions to their daily tasks. The correct answer is C, a phased rollout of the policy, beginning with pilot departments, accompanied by tailored training sessions for different roles and a dedicated feedback channel for employees to report challenges and suggest improvements. Explanation: the investigation demonstrates a scenario where Luxshare Precision, as a publicly listed company, is facing an internal challenge related to the implementation of a new compliance policy. The professional challenge lies in balancing the need for robust internal controls and adherence to regulatory requirements with the practicalities of operational efficiency and employee buy-in. The company must ensure that its compliance framework is not only designed to meet legal and ethical standards, but is also effectively integrated into daily operations without causing undue disruption or creating loopholes. Careful judgment is required to assess the feasibility and impact of different implementation strategies. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a phased rollout, comprehensive training, and continuous feedback mechanisms. This aligns with regulatory expectations for proactive compliance management, emphasizing a culture of integrity and accountability. By involving key stakeholders, providing clear guidance, and allowing for adjustments based on real-world application, the company demonstrates a commitment to both compliance and operational effectiveness. This proactive and adaptive strategy minimizes the risk of noncompliance and fosters a more sustainable ethical environment, which is crucial for maintaining investor confidence and regulatory standing. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate, top-down enforcement without adequate preparation or support would be professionally unacceptable. This could lead to confusion, resistance from employees, and ultimately, a failure to achieve the intended compliance outcomes. Such an approach risks creating a superficial adherence to the policy, rather than embedding it into the company's culture, potentially leading to regulatory scrutiny and penalties for noncompliance. Another incorrect approach, which delegates implementation entirely to a single department without cross-functional collaboration, would fail to address the diverse operational impacts and could result in fragmented or ineffective controls. This siloed approach neglects the interconnectedness of business processes and the shared responsibility for compliance. A third incorrect approach, which relies on outdated or generic training materials that do not address the specific nuances of Luxshare Precision's operations, would be insufficient to equip employees with the knowledge and skills needed to comply with the new policy, thereby increasing the likelihood of unintentional breaches. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough risk assessment of the proposed implementation. This involves identifying potential operational, ethical, and regulatory risks associated with each approach. Subsequently, they should evaluate each option against the company's strategic objectives, resource availability, and the specific requirements of the new policy. A critical step is to consider the impact on employees and to solicit input from those who will be directly affected by the changes. The chosen approach should be the one that offers the most robust and sustainable path to compliance, while also being practical and achievable within the organizational context. Continuous monitoring and evaluation are essential to ensure the ongoing effectiveness of the implemented policy. Question 4. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a new, more automated assembly line could significantly reduce labor costs for a key product component. However, preliminary observations suggest that the increased speed of the automated line might introduce subtle variations in component placement that were previously managed by manual dexterity. What is the most appropriate approach to address this potential process optimization? Option A. Implement the new automated assembly line immediately to realize cost savings and address any quality issues that arise through post-production inspection and rework. Option B. Postpone the implementation of the automated assembly line indefinitely until a perfect, zero-defect solution can be guaranteed to avoid any potential risk of quality compromise. Option C. Rely on the vendor's assurance that the automated line is designed to meet all industry standards and proceed with the implementation, assuming any minor deviations will be within acceptable tolerances. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive pilot study of the new automated assembly line in a controlled environment, rigorously validating its performance against established quality specifications and regulatory requirements before full-scale deployment. Correct answer is A. Implement the new automated assembly line immediately to realize cost savings and address any quality issues that arise through post-production inspection and rework. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for efficiency gains with the potential for unintended consequences on product quality and regulatory compliance. The pressure to implement process changes quickly, driven by cost reduction targets, can lead to overlooking critical validation steps or failing to adequately assess the impact on existing quality control measures. Careful judgment is required to ensure that process optimization does not compromise the integrity of Luxshare Precision's products or violate any applicable regulations. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic and data-driven methodology for process optimization. This involves a thorough understanding of the current process, identifying bottlenecks, and then proposing and testing changes in a controlled environment. Crucially, it includes a robust validation phase to confirm that the optimized process consistently meets quality standards and regulatory requirements. This aligns with principles of good manufacturing practices, GMP, and quality management systems, which mandate that any changes to production processes must be validated to ensure product safety, efficacy, and compliance. Ethical considerations also demand that changes do not negatively impact the end user or the company's reputation for quality. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on implementing changes based on anecdotal evidence or without proper validation would be professionally unacceptable. This would represent a failure to adhere to established quality control protocols and could lead to the introduction of defects or non-compliance with regulatory standards. Such an approach would also be ethically questionable, as it prioritizes short-term cost savings over long-term product integrity and customer trust. Another incorrect approach, which involves bypassing established change control procedures, would be a direct violation of internal policies and potentially external regulations governing product development and manufacturing. This demonstrates a disregard for systematic risk management and could lead to unmanageable deviations and a lack of traceability. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach to problem solving. This includes clearly defining the problem or opportunity, gathering relevant data, brainstorming potential solutions, evaluating the feasibility and impact of each solution, including risks and benefits, selecting the most appropriate solution, implementing it with appropriate controls and monitoring, and finally, reviewing the results and making further adjustments as needed. A strong emphasis should always be placed on understanding and adhering to the relevant regulatory framework and ethical principles throughout the entire process. Question 5. The evaluation methodology shows that the product development cycle for a new electronic component has experienced a significant slowdown at the testing and validation phase. Management is eager to accelerate this phase to meet market demand. Which of the following strategies best addresses this process optimization challenge while upholding professional standards? Option A. Conduct a thorough root cause analysis of the testing and validation delays. Identify specific inefficiencies or resource constraints, and implement targeted improvements such as process automation or revised testing protocols. Option B. Temporarily reduce the scope and rigor of the testing and validation procedures to expedite the release of the component to market. Option C. Focus solely on increasing the speed of individual testers without analyzing the overall workflow or interdependencies within the testing phase. Option D. Immediately allocate additional testing personnel to the phase, assuming that increased manpower will directly resolve the bottleneck without further investigation. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough root cause analysis of the testing and validation delays, identify specific inefficiencies or resource constraints, and implement targeted improvements such as process automation or revised testing protocols. Explanation: the evaluation methodology shows a new product development process that has been identified as a bottleneck. The challenge lies in balancing the need for rapid innovation with the imperative to maintain product quality and compliance, especially within a regulated industry where Luxshare Precision operates. Stakeholders are pushing for faster time to market, but shortcuts could lead to significant risks, including product defects, regulatory noncompliance, and reputational damage. This scenario demands a strategic approach to process optimization that considers both efficiency and robustness. The correct approach involves a comprehensive root cause analysis of the identified bottleneck, followed by the implementation of targeted process improvements. This might include re-engineering specific steps, introducing automation where appropriate, or enhancing cross-functional collaboration. Such an approach aligns with best professional practices by systematically addressing the underlying issues rather than applying superficial fixes. It prioritizes data-driven decision-making and a holistic view of the process, ensuring that improvements are sustainable and do not compromise quality or compliance. This aligns with principles of good governance and operational excellence, which are implicitly expected in professional conduct within any manufacturing and technology firm. An incorrect approach would be to simply increase resources, e.g., more personnel at the bottleneck, without understanding the root cause. This is often a costly and ineffective solution, as it doesn't address the fundamental inefficiencies in the process itself. It can lead to increased overhead without a proportional increase in output or quality, and may even introduce new points of failure. Ethically, it represents a failure to exercise due diligence in resource allocation and problem solving. Another incorrect approach would be to bypass quality control or regulatory checks to speed up the process. This is a severe ethical and regulatory failure. It directly contravenes industry standards and legal requirements designed to protect consumers and ensure product safety. Such actions could lead to severe penalties, product recalls, and irreparable damage to the company's reputation and trustworthiness. It demonstrates a disregard for professional responsibility and a prioritization of short-term gains over long-term integrity and compliance. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured problem-solving framework. This begins with clearly defining the problem and its scope. Next, a thorough investigation to identify the root cause is essential, utilizing tools like process mapping, data analysis, and stakeholder interviews. Based on the root cause, potential solutions should be brainstormed, evaluated for feasibility, impact, and risk, and then prioritized. Implementation should be followed by rigorous monitoring and evaluation to ensure the improvements are effective and sustainable. This iterative process ensures that optimization efforts are targeted, efficient, and aligned with both business objectives and ethical/regulatory obligations. Question 6. Investigation of how Luxshare Precision should disclose potential supply chain disruptions arising from climate change impacts on raw material sourcing, considering the varying perspectives of its investors, employees, and local communities. Option A. Disclose all identified climate-related risks to raw material sourcing and their potential financial implications, alongside mitigation strategies. Option B. Focus reporting on Luxshare Precision's positive environmental initiatives and community engagement programs, without detailing specific climate risks to supply chains. Option C. Omit any mention of climate change impacts on raw material sourcing to avoid alarming investors and potentially affecting short-term stock performance. Option D. Provide a generalized statement about supply chain resilience, without specifying the role of climate change or its potential financial consequences. The correct answer is A. Disclose all identified climate-related risks to raw material sourcing and their potential financial implications, alongside mitigation strategies. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's immediate financial interests and its long-term ethical and regulatory obligations to its stakeholders, particularly in the context of environmental, social, and governance-esque reporting. The pressure to present a favorable financial outlook can tempt management to downplay or omit negative ESG impacts, which can have significant consequences for investor confidence, regulatory compliance, and the company's reputation. Careful judgment is required to balance these competing pressures. The correct approach, which involves transparently reporting all material ESG risks and their potential financial implications, represents best professional practice. This aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and responsible investing. Specifically, it adheres to the spirit and letter of regulations that increasingly mandate disclosure of ESG-related risks, such as those promoted by the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, TCFD, framework, which is becoming a de facto global standard and is often incorporated into national regulatory requirements for listed companies. This approach fosters trust with investors and other stakeholders by providing a complete picture of the company's operational risks and opportunities, enabling informed decision-making. It also proactively addresses potential future regulatory scrutiny and reputational damage. An incorrect approach that prioritizes short-term financial gains by omitting or downplaying negative ESG impacts would constitute a failure to meet disclosure obligations. This could lead to regulatory penalties for misleading reporting, as well as significant reputational damage if the omitted information later comes to light. Ethically, it breaches the duty of care owed to stakeholders by providing an incomplete and potentially deceptive view of the company's performance and risks. Another incorrect approach, focusing solely on positive ESG initiatives without acknowledging associated risks or challenges, misrepresents the company's true ESG profile. This can mislead investors who are seeking to assess the full spectrum of risks and opportunities, potentially leading to misallocation of capital and undermining the credibility of ESG reporting. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a robust risk assessment framework that explicitly includes ESG factors. Professionals should consult relevant disclosure guidelines and regulations, seek expert advice on ESG materiality, and engage in open communication with senior management and the board regarding potential reporting discrepancies. Prioritizing transparency and accuracy, even when it presents short-term challenges, is crucial for long-term business sustainability and ethical conduct. Question 7. What factors determine the most effective approach for Luxshare Precision to balance the financial interests of its shareholders with the broader ethical and social responsibilities owed to its employees and the communities in which it operates? Option A. The preferences and demands of the largest institutional investors, as their financial influence is paramount. Option B. The extent to which proposed business strategies demonstrably consider the long-term well-being and impact on all key stakeholder groups, including employees, customers, suppliers, and the environment, alongside financial returns. Option C. The minimum legal and regulatory requirements that must be met to avoid penalties, without necessarily going beyond these obligations. Option D. The immediate profitability projections and the potential for short-term stock price appreciation, as these are the primary indicators of company success. The correct answer is B. The extent to which proposed business strategies demonstrably consider the long-term well-being and impact on all key stakeholder groups, including employees, customers, suppliers, and the environment, alongside financial returns. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Luxshare Precision, as a publicly listed company, has a diverse range of stakeholders with potentially conflicting interests. Balancing the short-term financial performance expectations of investors with the long-term sustainability goals and ethical considerations of employees and the community requires careful judgment. The company must navigate the complex interplay between profitability, corporate social responsibility, and regulatory compliance. The correct approach, focusing on a holistic assessment of stakeholder impact, represents best professional practice because it aligns with principles of good corporate governance and ethical business conduct. Specifically, it acknowledges that sustainable long-term value creation is dependent on maintaining positive relationships with all key stakeholders. This approach is supported by regulatory frameworks that increasingly emphasize transparency, accountability, and the consideration of environmental, social, and governance-esque factors in business operations. For instance, in many jurisdictions, companies are expected to report on their ESG performance, demonstrating a commitment to responsible business practices that benefit society as a whole, not just shareholders. This proactive consideration of diverse stakeholder needs mitigates risks associated with reputational damage, regulatory scrutiny, and operational disruptions. An incorrect approach that prioritizes only immediate shareholder returns without considering other stakeholders would be professionally unacceptable. This is because it can lead to ethical breaches, such as exploitative labor practices or environmental degradation, which can result in significant legal penalties, fines, and long-term damage to the company's reputation and brand value. Such a narrow focus disregards the interconnectedness of business operations with society and the environment, potentially violating principles of corporate social responsibility and leading to a loss of social license to operate. Another incorrect approach that solely focuses on meeting minimum legal compliance without considering broader stakeholder expectations would also be professionally deficient. While legal compliance is a baseline requirement, it does not encompass the full spectrum of ethical and responsible business conduct. Companies that operate only at the minimum legal threshold may still engage in practices that are detrimental to their stakeholders or the environment, leading to future regulatory challenges or public backlash. This approach fails to foster trust and long-term sustainability. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic stakeholder analysis. This includes identifying all relevant stakeholders, understanding their interests and concerns, assessing the potential impact of business decisions on each group, and developing strategies that aim to create shared value. Professionals should consult relevant corporate governance codes, ethical guidelines, and sustainability reporting frameworks to inform their decisions. A robust decision-making process will involve open communication with stakeholders, transparent reporting of impacts, and a commitment to continuous improvement in balancing competing interests. Question 8. When evaluating a request from a major supplier for expedited payment terms due to unforeseen financial difficulties, which of the following represents the most professionally sound and compliant approach for Luxshare Precision? Option A. Inform the supplier that their request cannot be accommodated due to standard payment terms and dismiss their concerns without further discussion. Option B. Agree to the expedited payment terms through an informal verbal agreement to expedite the process and avoid bureaucratic hurdles. Option C. Conduct a thorough review of the supplier's financial situation and the contractual agreement, consult with internal finance and legal departments, and assess the request against company policy and relevant regulations before making a decision. Option D. Immediately grant the expedited payment terms to maintain a positive relationship and avoid potential supply chain disruptions without further investigation. The correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough review of the supplier's financial situation and the contractual agreement, consult with internal finance and legal departments, and assess the request against company policy and relevant regulations before making a decision. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate financial interests of a key stakeholder, a major supplier, with the long-term strategic goals and ethical obligations of Luxshare Precision. The pressure to maintain a positive relationship with a critical supplier, especially when facing potential disruption, can lead to decisions that compromise ethical standards or regulatory compliance if not handled with extreme care and adherence to established frameworks. The challenge lies in discerning between legitimate business negotiation and undue influence or preferential treatment that could violate principles of fair competition and transparency. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a thorough, objective assessment of the supplier's request against established contractual terms, internal policies, and relevant regulatory guidelines. This involves seeking independent verification of the supplier's claims and considering the broader implications for Luxshare Precision's operations, financial health, and reputation. This approach aligns with professional best practices by prioritizing due diligence, transparency, and adherence to legal and ethical standards. It ensures that any decision is defensible, minimizes risk, and upholds the company's integrity, thereby fostering sustainable business relationships built on trust and fairness, rather than short-term expediency. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately acceding to the supplier's demands without independent verification. This fails to uphold professional due diligence and could lead to financial losses or regulatory penalties if the supplier's claims are exaggerated or unfounded. It also sets a dangerous precedent for future supplier interactions, potentially encouraging similar demands and undermining fair negotiation processes. Ethically, it could be viewed as a form of undue influence or favoritism, potentially violating principles of fair dealing. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the supplier's concerns outright without proper investigation. This risks damaging a critical supplier relationship, potentially leading to supply chain disruptions, increased costs, or reputational damage. It demonstrates a lack of responsiveness and a failure to engage constructively with stakeholders, which is contrary to good corporate governance and stakeholder management principles. It also misses an opportunity to identify and address genuine operational issues that could impact Luxshare Precision. A third incorrect approach is to seek a quick, informal resolution that bypasses established internal approval processes and documentation. This creates a lack of transparency and accountability, making it difficult to track decisions, assess their impact, or ensure compliance with regulations. Such informal arrangements can be susceptible to conflicts of interest and may not be legally sound, exposing the company to significant risks. It undermines the integrity of internal controls and governance structures. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such situations by first understanding the full context of the supplier's request and its potential impact. This involves gathering all relevant information, consulting internal policies and legal counsel, and assessing the request against contractual obligations and regulatory requirements. A structured decision-making process, including risk assessment and consideration of all stakeholder interests, is crucial. When faced with pressure, professionals must remain objective, adhere to established procedures, and prioritize ethical conduct and regulatory compliance above all else. Question 9. Strategic planning requires a comprehensive understanding of how a new product line introduction will affect various groups. Luxshare Precision is considering a new product line that involves significant automation. Which of the following approaches best reflects a responsible and sustainable strategic planning process from a stakeholder perspective? Option A. Actively engaging with employees to understand concerns about automation and retraining opportunities, soliciting feedback from potential customer segments regarding product features and usability, and assessing the impact on the local community while ensuring alignment with shareholder value. Option B. Focusing on the technical feasibility and market demand for the new product line, with minimal consideration for employee retraining or customer feedback on potential usability issues. Option C. Negotiating favorable terms with a key component supplier to secure the lowest possible input costs, even if it means overlooking potential environmental compliance issues associated with the supplier's manufacturing process. Option D. Prioritizing the immediate financial returns for shareholders by streamlining production processes, even if it leads to a reduction in the workforce. The correct answer is D. Prioritizing the immediate financial returns for shareholders by streamlining production processes, even if it leads to a reduction in the workforce. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Luxshare Precision, as a publicly listed company, must balance the competing interests of various stakeholders. The need for strategic planning, particularly concerning the introduction of a new product line, requires careful consideration of how this decision impacts shareholders, employees, customers, and the broader community. The challenge lies in identifying and prioritizing these interests in a way that is both ethically sound and compliant with relevant regulations, ensuring long-term sustainability and corporate reputation. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes understanding and integrating the diverse perspectives of all stakeholders. This aligns with best professional practice and regulatory expectations for corporate governance and social responsibility. By actively seeking input from different groups, Luxshare Precision can identify potential risks and opportunities that might otherwise be overlooked. This proactive engagement fosters trust, enhances decision-making quality, and mitigates potential conflicts, ultimately contributing to a more robust and sustainable strategic plan. This approach is ethically grounded in principles of fairness and transparency, and it aligns with the spirit of regulations that promote good corporate citizenship and stakeholder engagement. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach focuses solely on maximizing short-term shareholder profits. This fails to consider the potential negative impacts on employees, e.g., job displacement due to automation in the new product line, or customers, e.g., product quality concerns. Such a narrow focus can lead to ethical breaches, damage employee morale, erode customer loyalty, and potentially attract regulatory scrutiny for neglecting broader social responsibilities. Also ignores the long-term value creation that comes from a well-rounded stakeholder approach. Another incorrect approach prioritizes the immediate demands of a key supplier without adequately assessing the impact on other stakeholders. While supplier relationships are important, neglecting employee concerns about working conditions or customer feedback on product features in favor of a single supplier's needs can lead to operational inefficiencies, reputational damage, and potential breaches of contractual obligations or consumer protection laws. This approach demonstrates a lack of comprehensive risk assessment and a failure to uphold fiduciary duties to all stakeholders. A third incorrect approach involves making decisions based on internal management preferences without consulting relevant external stakeholders. This can lead to a disconnect between the company's strategic direction and the actual needs and expectations of its customer base or the regulatory environment. It risks developing products or strategies that are not market-ready, are perceived as unethical, or fail to comply with evolving industry standards or legal requirements, ultimately hindering the company's growth and reputation. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a stakeholder-centric approach to strategic planning. This involves a systematic process of identifying all relevant stakeholders, understanding their interests and potential impacts, and actively engaging them in the decision-making process. This framework allows for a balanced consideration of competing priorities, promotes ethical conduct, ensures regulatory compliance, and ultimately leads to more resilient and successful strategic outcomes. The process should involve open communication, transparent decision-making, and a commitment to addressing the legitimate concerns of all parties involved. Question 10. Process analysis reveals that Luxshare Precision is facing a new regulatory requirement for enhanced disclosure of supply chain sustainability metrics. A significant investor, who also holds a board seat and has been instrumental in securing recent financing, has expressed strong concerns about the potential negative impact of these disclosures on the company's stock price, and has urged the finance department to explore all avenues to minimize the scope and detail of the reported information, even if it means a less than complete adherence to the spirit of the regulation. The compliance department is aware of the investor's pressure and is seeking guidance on how to proceed. Option A. Inform the investor that their request cannot be accommodated due to regulatory obligations and cease further discussion on the matter. Option B. Proactively engage with the regulator to seek clarification on the specific disclosure requirements and potential interpretations, while also informing the investor of the company's commitment to full regulatory compliance. Option C. Comply with the investor's request and prepare disclosures that are technically compliant but strategically omit or downplay information that could negatively impact the stock price. Option D. Proceed with the disclosures as initially planned without further consultation, assuming the regulator will not scrutinize the details closely. The correct answer is B. Proactively engage with the regulator to seek clarification on the specific disclosure requirements and potential interpretations, while also informing the investor of the company's commitment to full regulatory compliance. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate financial interests of a key stakeholder with the long-term sustainability and ethical obligations of the company. The pressure to meet short-term targets can lead to decisions that compromise compliance and stakeholder trust. Careful judgment is required to navigate these competing demands. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes transparency and adherence to the established regulatory framework. By engaging with the regulator proactively and seeking clarification on the interpretation of the new disclosure requirements, the company demonstrates a commitment to compliance and good corporate governance. This aligns with the principles of responsible business conduct and fosters trust with regulatory bodies and other stakeholders. An incorrect approach that involves withholding information or misrepresenting the situation to the regulator would constitute a serious breach of regulatory obligations. This could lead to penalties, reputational damage, and loss of investor confidence. Another incorrect approach, such as proceeding with the disclosure without seeking clarification, risks noncompliance if the interpretation is later found to be incorrect, exposing the company to regulatory action and potential fines. A third incorrect approach, focusing solely on the financial impact without considering the regulatory implications, demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for legal and ethical responsibilities. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying all relevant stakeholders and their interests. This is followed by a thorough understanding of the applicable regulatory requirements and ethical principles. When faced with ambiguity or pressure, the framework dictates seeking expert advice, legal, compliance, and engaging in open communication with relevant parties, including regulators, to ensure informed and compliant decision-making. Prioritizing ethical conduct and regulatory adherence over short-term gains is paramount. Question 11. The evaluation methodology shows that a proposed new manufacturing facility for Luxshare Precision presents a significant opportunity for increased production capacity. However, preliminary assessments indicate potential environmental impacts on a nearby water source and concerns raised by local community groups regarding noise pollution and traffic. The project team is debating the best approach to proceed. Which of the following approaches best aligns with professional best practices and regulatory expectations for responsible corporate development? Option A. Commission a study solely focused on the economic benefits of the new facility, using this to justify the project to regulators and the community, while deferring detailed environmental and social impact mitigation until after construction is complete. Option B. Prioritize immediate cost savings by selecting the cheapest available construction and operational technologies, assuming that any environmental or community issues can be managed through public relations efforts later. Option C. Proceed with the project as planned, focusing on meeting the minimum regulatory requirements for environmental protection and noise levels, and address community concerns only if they escalate to formal complaints or legal challenges. Option D. Conduct a thorough environmental impact assessment. Engage proactively with local community representatives to understand and address their concerns, and integrate findings into the facility design and operational plans to ensure minimal negative externalities. The correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough environmental impact assessment. Engage proactively with local community representatives to understand and address their concerns, and integrate findings into the facility design and operational plans to ensure minimal negative externalities. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows a critical juncture where Luxshare Precision must balance the immediate financial implications of a new project with the long-term sustainability and ethical considerations of its operations. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a nuanced understanding of stakeholder interests, particularly when those interests appear to be in conflict. The company must navigate potential regulatory scrutiny, reputational risks, and the expectations of various groups who have a vested interest in its success and conduct. The correct approach, which prioritizes a comprehensive assessment of environmental impact and community engagement, represents best professional practice. This aligns with evolving regulatory frameworks that increasingly demand corporate social responsibility and sustainable business practices. Specifically, it reflects a commitment to principles of good corporate governance and ethical conduct, which are often implicitly or explicitly embedded in the operational guidelines and expectations for companies operating in regulated environments. Engaging with affected communities and understanding potential environmental consequences before committing resources demonstrates foresight and a proactive approach to risk management, minimizing the likelihood of future remediation costs, legal challenges, and reputational damage. This proactive stance is crucial for maintaining long-term stakeholder trust and operational viability. An incorrect approach that solely focuses on maximizing short-term profit without considering the environmental and social externalities would be professionally unacceptable. Such an approach risks violating environmental protection regulations, which can lead to significant fines, operational shutdowns, and legal liabilities. Ethically, it demonstrates a disregard for the well-being of the environment and the communities in which the company operates, potentially damaging its social license to operate. Another incorrect approach that dismisses community concerns as mere opposition without thorough investigation fails to acknowledge the legitimate rights and interests of stakeholders. This can lead to protracted disputes, negative publicity, and a breakdown in trust, ultimately hindering project progress and potentially leading to project cancellation. It also ignores the potential for valuable insights from the community that could inform more sustainable and acceptable project designs. A third incorrect approach that relies on superficial compliance with minimum regulatory standards, without striving for best practices or considering the spirit of the regulations, is also professionally deficient. While technically meeting legal requirements, it leaves the company vulnerable to future regulatory changes, public pressure, and reputational damage. It signals a lack of commitment to genuine sustainability and ethical leadership, which can erode stakeholder confidence over time. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a multi-stakeholder engagement framework. This includes identifying all relevant stakeholders, understanding their concerns and expectations, and integrating this feedback into the decision-making process. A thorough risk assessment, encompassing environmental, social, and governance-esque factors, should be conducted. This should be followed by scenario planning and the development of mitigation strategies. Ultimately, decisions should be guided by a commitment to long-term value creation, ethical conduct, and regulatory compliance, rather than solely by short-term financial gains. Question 12. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood of a significant operational disruption due to a potential supply chain issue. However, internal discussions have revealed conflicting interpretations of the data and potential mitigation strategies. What is the most prudent next step? Option A. Proceed with the most straightforward mitigation strategy identified on the risk matrix, as the moderate likelihood suggests a timely decision is more critical than exhaustive analysis. Option B. Delegate the decision-making authority to the department most directly affected by the potential disruption to ensure swift action. Option C. Focus solely on the highest impact, lowest likelihood risks identified on the matrix, as these represent the most catastrophic potential outcomes. Option D. Convene a cross-functional team to conduct a deeper dive into the underlying data, explore alternative mitigation strategies not initially considered, and seek input from legal and compliance departments before making a final decision. The correct answer is D. Convene a cross-functional team to conduct a deeper dive into the underlying data, explore alternative mitigation strategies not initially considered, and seek input from legal and compliance departments before making a final decision. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for a decision with the potential for significant, unforeseen consequences. The risk matrix, while a useful tool, is a snapshot in time and relies on subjective assessments of likelihood and impact. The pressure to act quickly can lead to overlooking critical data or alternative perspectives, potentially resulting in a decision that is suboptimal or even detrimental. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough, multifaceted evaluation before committing to a course of action. This aligns with the principles of prudent decision-making and risk management, which are fundamental in regulated environments. By seeking diverse input and considering a broader range of potential outcomes, including those not immediately apparent on the risk matrix, professionals uphold their duty of care and ensure decisions are robust and defensible. This proactive stance minimizes the likelihood of regulatory breaches or ethical lapses stemming from hasty or ill-informed choices. An incorrect approach that relies solely on the risk matrix without further investigation fails to acknowledge the limitations of such tools. It can lead to regulatory noncompliance if the matrix overlooks specific legal or ethical considerations that are not quantifiable in a standard risk assessment. Another incorrect approach, focusing only on the most probable outcome, ignores the potential for low probability, high impact events, which can result in significant financial or reputational damage and potentially violate principles of due diligence. A third incorrect approach, prioritizing speed over accuracy, directly contravenes the ethical obligation to make informed decisions, potentially leading to actions that are not in the best interest of the company or its stakeholders and could be seen as negligent. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that begins with understanding the context and objectives. This involves gathering all relevant information, including data, beyond the initial risk assessment. It then requires identifying and evaluating potential courses of action, considering their implications from various perspectives: financial, operational, legal, ethical, reputational. Seeking input from subject matter experts and stakeholders is crucial. Finally, a decision should be made based on a comprehensive analysis, with a plan for monitoring and adapting as circumstances evolve. Question 13. Compliance review shows that a sales team is consistently missing its quarterly targets, leading to increased pressure from senior management to boost performance. During a team meeting, a senior salesperson suggests a strategy that, while potentially effective in the short term, skirts the edges of acceptable client engagement practices and could be misinterpreted as misleading by some clients. The sales manager is aware of this suggestion and is considering its implementation to alleviate the pressure. Option A. The sales manager should convene a meeting with the sales team to discuss the ethical implications of the proposed strategy, consult with the compliance department to understand any potential regulatory breaches, and explore alternative compliant methods for improving sales performance. Option B. The sales manager should implement the strategy, but instruct the team to be extremely careful not to leave any written evidence of their actions, relying on verbal assurances and plausible deniability. Option C. The sales manager should ignore the suggestion, hoping the pressure will subside on its own, and continue to focus on existing sales methods without addressing the underlying performance issues or the ethical concerns raised. Option D. The sales manager should immediately approve the proposed strategy, emphasizing to the team that meeting targets is the highest priority and that minor ethical considerations can be overlooked in such circumstances. Correct answer is A. The sales manager should convene a meeting with the sales team to discuss the ethical implications of the proposed strategy, consult with the compliance department to understand any potential regulatory breaches, and explore alternative, compliant methods for improving sales performance. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between achieving business objectives and upholding ethical standards, particularly when faced with pressure to meet targets. The need for a robust decision-making framework is paramount to navigate such situations without compromising integrity or regulatory compliance. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic and ethical evaluation of the situation. It involves gathering all relevant facts, understanding the potential consequences of different action, consulting with appropriate stakeholders, e.g., compliance, legal, and ultimately making a decision that aligns with the company's code of conduct and relevant regulations. This proactive and principled stance ensures that decisions are not made impulsively or under duress, thereby mitigating risks and fostering a culture of integrity. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on short-term gains without considering the ethical implications or regulatory landscape is professionally unacceptable. This could lead to violations of internal policies, industry standards, or even legal statutes, resulting in reputational damage, financial penalties, and loss of trust. Another incorrect approach that involves ignoring potential red flags or downplaying concerns to avoid difficult conversations demonstrates a lack of due diligence and ethical responsibility. This can create a blind spot, allowing misconduct to fester and escalate. A third incorrect approach that relies on personal intuition or anecdotal evidence without a structured evaluation process is also flawed. While intuition can play a role, it must be supported by objective analysis and adherence to established decision-making protocols to ensure fairness and accountability. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that includes identifying the problem or ethical dilemma, gathering all relevant information, identifying stakeholders and their interests, evaluating alternative courses of action against ethical principles and regulatory requirements, selecting the best course of action, implementing the decision, and reviewing the outcome. This systematic process ensures that decisions are well-reasoned, defensible, and aligned with professional integrity. Question 14. Stakeholder feedback indicates a potential opportunity to streamline a critical operational process by adopting a new technology. However, initial assessments suggest this technology may have unforeseen environmental implications that are not fully understood, and some key suppliers have expressed concerns about the transition's impact on their existing contracts. The executive team is eager to implement the technology quickly to gain a competitive advantage. Which of the following approaches best navigates this complex decision-making scenario? Option A. Proceed with the technology adoption based on the executive team's immediate desire for competitive advantage, relying on internal expertise to manage any emergent environmental or supplier issues. Option B. Prioritize the rapid adoption of the new technology to secure the competitive advantage, addressing any environmental or supplier issues reactively as they arise. Option C. Defer the decision until all potential environmental impacts are definitively quantified and all supplier concerns are fully resolved, even if this means missing the competitive window. Option D. Conduct a thorough environmental impact assessment and engage in detailed discussions with key suppliers to understand and mitigate their concerns before proceeding with any implementation. The correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough environmental impact assessment and engage in detailed discussions with key suppliers to understand and mitigate their concerns before proceeding with any implementation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing competing stakeholder interests with the company's strategic objectives, all while adhering to the principles of responsible decision-making. The core difficulty lies in discerning the most ethically sound and strategically beneficial path when faced with potentially conflicting information and priorities. Careful judgment is required to avoid short-term gains that could lead to long-term reputational damage or regulatory noncompliance. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a structured, evidence-based decision-making framework. This involves gathering comprehensive information, objectively assessing risks and benefits, consulting relevant internal and external experts, and ultimately making a decision that aligns with the company's values and long-term sustainability. This methodical process ensures that decisions are not driven by immediate pressures or biases, but are grounded in a thorough understanding of the situation and its potential ramifications. It also fosters transparency and accountability. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate cost savings without considering potential downstream impacts, such as reputational damage or increased regulatory scrutiny, represents a failure to adhere to principles of good corporate governance and ethical conduct. This approach prioritizes short-term financial gains over long-term stakeholder value and sustainability, which can lead to significant ethical and regulatory breaches. Another incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or the opinions of a single influential stakeholder without rigorous due diligence demonstrates a lack of professional objectivity and a failure to follow a robust decision-making process. This can result in decisions that are not in the best interest of the company or its broader stakeholder group, and may inadvertently lead to noncompliance with industry best practices or regulatory expectations. A third incorrect approach that involves delaying the decision indefinitely due to uncertainty, without actively seeking to mitigate that uncertainty or explore alternative solutions, is also professionally unacceptable. This inaction can lead to missed opportunities, increased risks, and a perception of indecisiveness, which can erode stakeholder confidence and potentially lead to regulatory issues if deadlines are missed. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that includes defining the problem clearly, identifying all relevant stakeholders and their interests, gathering comprehensive and objective data, evaluating potential solutions against predefined criteria, including ethical and regulatory considerations, consulting with appropriate parties, making a reasoned decision, implementing the decision, and monitoring its outcomes. This iterative process ensures that decisions are well-informed, defensible, and aligned with professional standards. Question 15. The performance metrics show a significant increase in operational costs over the last quarter, prompting a review of potential cost-saving measures. A proposal has been put forward to reduce the quality control budget by 20% by streamlining inspection processes and reducing the frequency of certain material tests. This proposal is driven by a desire to meet immediate profitability targets. Option A. Immediately implement the proposed 20% reduction in the quality control budget to achieve the targeted profitability, assuming that any minor quality issues can be addressed reactively. Option B. Seek informal opinions from a few senior engineers about the feasibility of the budget cut, relying on their experience to gauge the impact on quality. Option C. Prioritize the cost reduction by reallocating funds from less critical departments, without a detailed analysis of the quality control process itself. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment that includes potential regulatory noncompliance, product quality degradation, and customer dissatisfaction, and consult with the legal and compliance departments before making any decision. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment that includes potential regulatory noncompliance, product quality degradation, and customer dissatisfaction, and consult with the legal and compliance departments before making any decision. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for cost reduction with the long-term implications of compromising quality and potentially violating regulatory standards. The pressure to meet financial targets can lead to hasty decisions that overlook critical compliance and ethical considerations. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any decision-making process is robust, transparent, and aligned with the company's obligations. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a structured, data-driven, and compliant decision-making framework. This involves a thorough assessment of all relevant factors, including regulatory requirements, ethical implications, and potential business impacts. By engaging relevant stakeholders and seeking expert advice, the company ensures that decisions are well-informed and defensible. This aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and responsible business conduct, which are often underpinned by specific regulatory frameworks designed to protect consumers, investors, and the market. For instance, in many jurisdictions, there are regulations concerning product safety, fair competition, and accurate financial reporting, all of which could be jeopardized by a poorly considered cost-cutting measure. Adhering to a defined decision-making framework demonstrates a commitment to ethical conduct and regulatory compliance, fostering trust and long-term sustainability. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate cost savings without considering regulatory compliance would be professionally unacceptable. This could lead to violations of product safety standards, misrepresentation of product capabilities, or unfair competitive practices, all of which carry significant legal and reputational risks. Such an approach demonstrates a disregard for the established legal and ethical boundaries, potentially resulting in fines, lawsuits, and damage to the company's brand. Another incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or the opinions of a few individuals without a systematic evaluation would also be professionally unsound. This lacks the rigor necessary to make informed decisions, especially when dealing with complex business operations and regulatory environments. It opens the door to bias and oversight, increasing the likelihood of making a decision that is not only ineffective but also detrimental to the company and its stakeholders. This approach fails to uphold the professional duty of care and diligence expected in business decision-making. Professionals should utilize a decision-making framework that includes 1. Problem identification. Clearly define the issue and its scope. 2. Information gathering. Collect all relevant data including financial, operational, and regulatory information. 3. Stakeholder consultation. Engage with all affected parties including legal, compliance, and operational teams. 4. Option generation. Brainstorm potential solutions. 5. Option evaluation. Assess each option against predefined criteria including cost, feasibility, regulatory compliance, and ethical considerations. 6. Decision-making. Select the best option based on the evaluation. 7. Implementation and monitoring. Put the decision into action and track its effectiveness and compliance. Question 16. Market research demonstrates a significant emerging trend in a sector where a former client of your firm operated. You possess detailed knowledge of this former client's operational strategies and challenges, gained during your advisory role. You are now considering a new business venture that would capitalize on this emerging trend, and you believe your insights from the previous engagement would be highly valuable. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Proceed with the new venture but avoid any direct mention or use of specific information learned from the former client, relying only on general market observations. Option B. Immediately pursue the new venture, leveraging your understanding of the former client's operations as a competitive advantage, as the client relationship has concluded. Option C. Consult with your firm's compliance and legal departments to assess potential conflicts of interest and confidentiality obligations before proceeding. Option D. Inform the former client of your intended venture and seek their implicit or explicit approval to proceed. The correct answer is B. Immediately pursue the new venture, leveraging your understanding of the former client's operations as a competitive advantage, as the client relationship has concluded. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the pursuit of new business opportunities with the ethical obligation to avoid conflicts of interest and maintain client confidentiality. The decision-maker must navigate potential reputational damage and regulatory scrutiny if perceived as leveraging confidential information inappropriately. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any new venture is based on publicly available information or legitimate market analysis, not on insights gained from a previous client relationship. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. By explicitly seeking guidance from internal compliance and legal departments, the professional demonstrates a commitment to upholding the firm's ethical standards and adhering to relevant regulations. This proactive step ensures that any decision is made with full awareness of potential conflicts and legal implications, safeguarding both the individual and the firm from regulatory sanctions and reputational harm. This aligns with the principles of professional integrity and due diligence expected in regulated financial environments. An incorrect approach that relies solely on personal judgment, without consulting internal experts, fails to acknowledge the complexities of conflict of interest rules and confidentiality obligations. This could lead to inadvertent breaches of regulatory requirements, such as those governing insider information or fiduciary duties, resulting in disciplinary action, fines, or loss of professional licenses. Another incorrect approach that proceeds with the new venture without any internal consultation, assuming the information is not sensitive, risks misinterpreting the scope of confidentiality agreements or the definition of material non-public information, thereby exposing the firm to significant legal and ethical repercussions. A third incorrect approach that involves delaying the decision indefinitely without any action or consultation also fails to meet professional standards, as it can lead to missed opportunities and a lack of clear direction, potentially impacting business development and client relationships. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that begins with identifying potential ethical and regulatory issues. This involves a thorough assessment of the situation, including the nature of the information involved, the existing client relationships, and the proposed new venture. The next step is to consult relevant internal policies, codes of conduct, and regulatory guidelines. Crucially, seeking advice from compliance and legal departments is paramount when any ambiguity or potential conflict arises. Documenting the decision-making process and the rationale behind the final choice is also essential for accountability and future reference. Question 17. Benchmark analysis indicates that a colleague has proposed a new method for reporting performance metrics that appears to significantly boost reported figures without a clear explanation of the underlying operational changes. This method has been presented as a way to meet ambitious targets more easily. What is the most appropriate professional response? Option A. Seek detailed clarification on the methodology. Request supporting data or evidence for the claimed improvements, and consult with relevant internal experts or compliance officers before considering adoption. Option B. Implement the proposed method but only after the current reporting period concludes to avoid disrupting ongoing performance tracking. Option C. Immediately adopt the proposed method, assuming the colleague has acted in good faith and that the reported improvements will be beneficial for meeting targets. Option D. Politely decline the proposal, stating that current reporting methods are sufficient and there is no need to explore new, potentially complex approaches. The correct answer is A. Seek detailed clarification on the methodology, request supporting data or evidence for the claimed improvements, and consult with relevant internal experts or compliance officers before considering adoption. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing competing interests and adhering to ethical principles when faced with potentially misleading information. The core difficulty lies in discerning the true intent and impact of a proposed strategy, especially when it appears to offer a shortcut to achieving performance targets. Careful judgment is required to avoid actions that could compromise integrity or violate regulatory expectations. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough, evidence-based evaluation before committing to a course of action. This aligns with the fundamental ethical duty of due diligence and the regulatory expectation that professionals act with integrity and competence. By seeking clarification and independent verification, one demonstrates a commitment to understanding the substance of the proposal and its implications, rather than accepting it at face value. This proactive stance helps prevent potential missteps and ensures decisions are grounded in reality, thereby upholding professional standards and safeguarding the firm's reputation. An incorrect approach that relies solely on the persuasive arguments of a colleague without independent verification fails to meet the standard of professional skepticism. This could lead to the adoption of a strategy that is not genuinely beneficial or, worse, is designed to circumvent established procedures or ethical guidelines. The regulatory or ethical failure here is a lack of due diligence and an abdication of personal responsibility for the decision-making process. Another incorrect approach, which involves immediately implementing the proposed strategy based on the assumption of good intentions, is equally problematic. This bypasses the critical step of assessment and could result in unintended negative consequences, including regulatory breaches or reputational damage, if the strategy is flawed or unethical. The failure lies in a premature commitment without adequate understanding or validation, demonstrating a lack of professional rigor. Finally, an approach that dismisses the proposal outright without proper investigation, perhaps due to personal bias or a desire to avoid perceived complexity, also falls short. While skepticism is healthy, outright rejection without a fair assessment can stifle innovation and prevent the exploration of legitimate opportunities. The ethical failure here is a lack of open-mindedness and a failure to conduct a reasonable inquiry, which can be seen as unprofessional. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that involves 1. Understanding the objective, 2. Gathering all relevant information, 3. Critically evaluating the information and propose solutions, 4. Considering potential risks and ethical implications, 5. Seeking clarification or expert advice when needed, and 6. Making a reasoned decision based on the evidence and professional judgment. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are well-informed, ethical, and aligned with professional responsibilities. Question 18. Benchmark analysis indicates that a senior procurement manager at Luxshare Precision has a close personal friendship with the owner of a potential supplier. This supplier is bidding on a significant contract that the manager will be directly involved in evaluating. The manager is aware of the potential for this relationship to be perceived as a conflict of interest. What is the most appropriate course of action for the procurement manager? Option A. Disclose the personal friendship to their supervisor and recuse themselves from all aspects of the evaluation and decision-making process for this contract. Option B. Proceed with the evaluation as normal, assuming their professional judgment will not be compromised by the friendship. Option C. Discreetly advocate for the friend's company during internal discussions, highlighting their strengths without explicitly mentioning the personal relationship. Option D. Inform the friend's company that they should withdraw their bid to avoid any appearance of impropriety. The correct answer is A. Disclose the personal friendship to their supervisor and recuse themselves from all aspects of the evaluation and decision-making process for this contract. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires navigating a situation where a potential conflict of interest may arise, impacting the integrity of decision-making. The core difficulty lies in ensuring that personal relationships do not unduly influence business judgments, particularly when those judgments have financial implications for the company and its stakeholders. Maintaining objectivity and adhering to established ethical guidelines are paramount. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes transparency and adherence to the company's established conflict of interest policy. By disclosing the relationship and recusing oneself from the decision-making process, the individual demonstrates a commitment to ethical conduct and upholds the principle of acting in the best interest of the company. This aligns with regulatory expectations that individuals in positions of trust must avoid situations that could compromise their impartiality. Specifically, within the framework of Luxshare Precision's internal policies and general corporate governance principles, such disclosure and recusal are standard procedures to mitigate risks associated with conflicts of interest. An incorrect approach that involves proceeding with the decision without disclosure would be a significant ethical and potentially regulatory failure. It breaches the trust placed in the individual and creates an environment where decisions might be perceived as biased, even if no actual impropriety occurred. This undermines the fairness of the procurement process and could lead to suboptimal business outcomes for Luxshare Precision. Furthermore, failing to disclose a potential conflict of interest can violate internal company codes of conduct, and in some jurisdictions, may have legal ramifications if it leads to financial harm or a breach of fiduciary duty. Another incorrect approach, such as attempting to subtly influence the decision in favor of the acquaintance without explicit disclosure, is even more egregious. This constitutes a direct violation of ethical principles and demonstrates a lack of integrity. It not only creates a conflict of interest, but actively attempts to exploit it for personal gain or to benefit an associate, which is unacceptable in any professional setting and directly contravenes the spirit and letter of conflict of interest regulations. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a clear, multi-step framework. First, recognize the potential for a conflict of interest. Second, consult the company's established policies and procedures regarding conflicts of interest. Third, if a potential conflict is identified, disclose it promptly and transparently to the appropriate authority, e.g., supervisor, compliance officer. Fourth, Follow the prescribed course of action, which typically involves recusal from any decision-making or influencing activities related to the matter. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are made objectively and in the best interest of the organization, thereby safeguarding its reputation and operational integrity. Question 19. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood of a significant operational disruption impacting key supply chain logistics. Which of the following actions best represents a professional approach to assessing the full impact of this risk? Option A. Conduct a detailed qualitative analysis of potential consequences across all affected business units, including customer impact, recovery time objectives, and interdependencies. Option B. Accept the risk as presented in the matrix and monitor for any immediate, obvious signs of disruption without further proactive assessment. Option C. Immediately halt all non-essential projects and reallocate all available resources to develop a comprehensive, high-cost contingency plan. Option D. Disregard the risk as it is not categorized as high likelihood or catastrophic impact and therefore does not warrant significant attention. The correct answer is A. Conduct a detailed qualitative analysis of potential consequences across all affected business units, including customer impact, recovery time objectives, and interdependencies. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the risk matrix, a standard tool for impact assessment, indicates a moderate likelihood of a significant operational disruption. The challenge lies in determining the appropriate level of response and resource allocation when the impact is potentially severe but not guaranteed. Overreacting could lead to inefficient use of resources, while underreacting could expose the company to unacceptable losses. The need for a balanced and evidence-based decision is paramount. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a detailed, qualitative assessment of the potential consequences of the identified risk. This means going beyond the matrix's initial rating to understand the specific business units affected, the duration of potential disruption, and the cascading effects on customers, suppliers, and regulatory compliance. This deep dive allows for the development of targeted mitigation strategies and contingency plans that are proportionate to the actual risk. This aligns with best professional practice by ensuring that resources are deployed effectively and that the company is adequately prepared for plausible scenarios, thereby upholding its duty of care and operational resilience. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to dismiss the risk entirely because it is not rated as high likelihood or catastrophic impact. This fails to acknowledge that moderate likelihood combined with significant impact can still represent a material threat that warrants proactive management. Ethically, this could be seen as a dereliction of duty if foreseeable harm is not addressed. Another incorrect approach would be to immediately implement the most expensive and resource-intensive mitigation strategy without further analysis. This demonstrates a lack of proportionality and could lead to significant waste of company resources. It fails to apply sound judgment and could be viewed as an inefficient allocation of capital, potentially impacting shareholder value. A third incorrect approach would be to rely solely on the initial risk matrix rating and take no further action, assuming that moderate and significant is an acceptable level of risk. This ignores the dynamic nature of risk and the potential for unforeseen escalation. It represents a failure to engage in continuous risk management and could lead to significant reputational damage and financial loss if the risk materializes. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach impact assessment by first understanding the limitations of any matrix or scoring system. The matrix provides a starting point, not a final answer. The next step is to conduct a qualitative analysis to understand the nuances of the risk's potential impact. This involves engaging with subject matter experts, considering various operational scenarios, and assessing the potential financial, reputational, and regulatory consequences. Based on this deeper understanding, proportionate and effective mitigation and contingency plans can be developed and implemented. This iterative process ensures that risk management is both robust and efficient. Question 20. Operational review demonstrates that certain processes within the finance department are inefficient and costly. Management is considering streamlining these processes by consolidating roles and automating certain manual tasks to achieve significant cost savings. However, there is a concern that these changes, if not carefully managed, could inadvertently weaken the existing internal control environment and potentially impact the company's ability to comply with financial reporting regulations. What is the most appropriate approach to manage the potential risks associated with these proposed operational changes? Option A. Defer the assessment of the impact on internal controls and compliance to a later date, once the new operational processes have been fully established and stabilized. Option B. Proceed with the operational changes immediately to realize cost savings and address any control or compliance issues that may arise after implementation. Option C. Rely on the existing internal audit function to identify and report any control or compliance issues that emerge after the operational changes have been implemented. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment of the proposed changes on internal controls and compliance procedures before implementation, and develop mitigation strategies to address any identified weaknesses. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment of the proposed changes on internal controls and compliance procedures before implementation, and develop mitigation strategies to address any identified weaknesses. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need for operational efficiency and cost reduction with the imperative to maintain robust internal controls and compliance with regulatory expectations. The pressure to implement changes quickly, driven by the operational review, can lead to overlooking potential risks and the adequacy of existing controls. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any proposed changes do not inadvertently weaken the company's ability to prevent, detect, and report financial misconduct or noncompliance. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough and systematic impact assessment before implementing changes. This involves a detailed analysis of how proposed operational adjustments might affect the design and effectiveness of internal controls, compliance procedures, and risk management frameworks. By proactively identifying potential control gaps or weaknesses, the company can develop and implement mitigating strategies, thereby ensuring continued adherence to regulatory requirements and ethical standards. This aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and risk management, which are fundamental to maintaining stakeholder trust and operational integrity. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on cost savings without a corresponding assessment of control impact would represent a significant regulatory and ethical failure. Such an approach could lead to the erosion of internal controls, increasing the risk of fraud, errors, and non-compliance with applicable laws and regulations. This would violate the fundamental duty of management to establish and maintain an adequate system of internal control, as often mandated by regulatory bodies. Another incorrect approach, which involves deferring the control assessment to a later date, is also professionally unacceptable. This demonstrates a disregard for proactive risk management and could result in significant control deficiencies going undetected for an extended period, potentially leading to material misstatements or regulatory breaches. This failure to act promptly on potential control issues is a breach of professional responsibility. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk-based approach. First, clearly define the scope and objectives of the operational changes. Second, identify all relevant internal controls and compliance processes that could be impacted. Third, conduct a comprehensive impact assessment, evaluating the potential risks and control weaknesses introduced by the proposed changes. Fourth, develop and implement appropriate mitigation strategies, including control enhancements or new procedures. Finally, establish a monitoring and review mechanism to ensure the ongoing effectiveness of the revised controls and processes. This systematic approach ensures that operational improvements are achieved without compromising regulatory compliance and ethical conduct.